you about these grifting folks in the Trump administration. That's not my opinion. That's a fact. How many times have we told you how they are all about using the power of the Oval Office to help out their own? Well, guess what you're seeing right now? You literally are seeing the Donald Trump administration doing all they can to lean on African nations to do business with Elon Musk. This is an article in ProPublica. This is the article right here. It says the Trump administration leaned on African countries. The goal, get business for Elon Musk. You see right here, you talk about in Gambia, where they were trying to sit here and get them to use Elon Musk's Starlink. In fact, Elon Musk today sent out a tweet. He sent out a tweet where he was complaining about, oh, guess what, y'all? Mr. Victim was complaining about the racism because in South Africa, they won't even talk to me. They won't even take my phone calls because they won't do Starlink. Yeah. He's literally whining and complaining that in his own home country of South Africa, they won't let him come in and do Starlink. Boy, isn't that so sad? Look, this is the tweet, y'all. South Africa has now passed 142 laws forcing discrimination against anyone who is not black. Even though I was born in South Africa, the government will not grant Starlink a license to operate simply because I am not black. This is shameful. This is a shameful disgrace to the legacy of the great Nelson Mandela, who sought to have all races treated equally in South Africa. Joshua Kaplan is a reporter for ProPublica. He joins us right now. Joshua, glad to have you back. Dude, this is crazy. And so what you have is you have the Trump administration doing all they can to drive billions of dollars in business to an individual who did more to fund his re-election than anybody else in America.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously this dual role that Musk has right now of being the biggest campaign donor in the White House with this sweeping power to essentially to remake foreign policy, to remake the federal government. At the same time, has not only not divested in these companies, but is still running them. He is still the CEO of them. I mean, that in of itself opens up, the sort of conflicts of interest that, I mean, it's difficult to imagine how a past administration would handle it, but, carefully vetted by government ethics lawyers. And now with what we've discovered has been happening in Africa with the State Department, and particularly in Gambia, I mean, it's really the starkest known example of the Trump administration using the incredible might of U.S. foreign policy apparatus to advance the business interests of Elon Musk.
And see, and the thing here, we already saw what happened when Trump gave him the keys to the kingdom with Doge. And that is, he starts whacking departments, basically gutted every single agency that was investigating his companies, saving himself potentially billions of dollars in fines and also through lawsuits. And Trump is like, oh, yeah, we're going to use the power of the United States to force these countries that have small GDP, that greatly depend upon foreign aid. And so we're going to basically force them to do our bidding. And that is to drive money into the pockets of Elon Musk, who, by the way, Elon Musk is so hilarious. He's claiming discrimination. This is the same Elon Musk whose Tesla was sued by black people for discrimination, and they lost.
Yeah, I mean, and to flesh it out a little bit more, I mean, what we found is that since Inauguration Day, the State Department has made this global push to help Elon expand his business empire in the developing world, and particularly in Africa. And this is played out in several countries in the continent, but the harshest, the most extreme example that we know about, at least, is what we discovered in Gambia. And to refresh, people haven't been to Gambia. It's a tiny democracy in West Africa that is, it's one of the poorest countries in the world. About half of the country is living on less than $4 a day. And why Musk cares about Gambia is that his satellite internet company, Starlink, is trying to get a license to sell its products there. And the Gambian authorities and regulators have been slow to sign off on the approvals that he needs. And so what happens, we get this months-long, extremely aggressive pressure campaign by the U.S. government to push this nation to give Musk company what he wants.
In fact, y'all right. In recent months, senior State Department officials in both Washington and Gambia have coordinated with Starlink executives to coax, lobby, and browbeat at least 7 Gambian government ministers to help Musk. Records and interviews show one of those cabinet officials told ProPublica his government is under maximum pressure to yield.
And it keeps escalating. I mean, it's at one point the State Department helped arrange this meeting between Starlink executives and the kind of key Gambian cabinet minister who's overseeing the government's review of Starlink's license. In DC, it got really contentious, and as it was recounted to us by one of the gentlemen who was present, and several other people who were briefed on it. The Starlink people were accusing this Gambian official of holding back his nation's progress, saying things like, "We want our license now. Why are you delaying it?" But it ends in a stalemate. The Gambian official, his name is Lamin Jabi, doesn't yield. And then Lamin Jabi was supposed to have another meeting about this with senior State Department people at Foggy Bottom, but the Starlink people tell him, we're going to cancel that. There's no more need for that. And then instead, that very day, 4,000 miles away back in his home country in Gambia, in Banjul, the U.S. ambassador writes a letter to the president of the entire country, the president of Gambia, saying, asking him to go around this cabinet minister and make the Starlink license happen. She calls it an important request. And so this cabinet minister, Jabi, he tells people that, he feels like the ambassador is trying to get him fired.
Yeah, I mean, that's what they do. Questions from our panel for Joshua. Robert, you first.
Thanks so much for this reporting. One of my good friends, James Gomez, is from the Gambia and sent me this article this morning, and I'm the resident space nerd. So I think we kind of have to explain to people exactly what Starlink is and why it is important. So right now, internet is communicated through underwater cables around the globe through big nodules, and these are controlled by independent governments. What Elon Musk has been doing is, one, buying his own rocket company, SpaceX, in order to deliver 20 to 50 Starlink satellites to create a 40,000 satellite constellation, which can provide low Earth orbit, LEO, low latency internet, which would essentially make the underwater cable system completely pointless. Every time you see these SpaceX starships exploding, etc., it's because that's their only way to get enough of the Gen 2 Starlink satellites into orbit to make his dream of global internet possible. And also, he has to do this at a speed where he will be able to beat Amazon and Jeff Bezos' Project Kuiper, which goes up on the Blue Origin. Also, the Chinese are working on their own version. Also, the Europeans are working on their own version. Starlink is simply the most mature of these efforts on the international basis. Essentially, what Elon Musk is attempting to do is control global information.
Yep.
That he will be the international power broker when it comes to how the developing world accesses information. And if he's able to beat to market every other competitor, then essentially every African child for the second half of this century will only get information through Elon Musk. People need to remember that the African continent, the sub-Saharan Africa, is the youngest population on the globe. We're talking about the average age of 19 years old. So the entire second half of this century will be the African century. As European birth rates are declining, as American birth rates are declining, as Chinese, Indian, Japanese birth rates are declining, the birth rate in Africa and developing world is increasing. So this isn't simply a play of saying, oh, I want to have more money in my pocket. He doesn't want to control the world going into the second half of this century. And when you have the assets of the United States government essentially at his control, being able to pressure through foreign aid, through the closing of the USAID offices, through diplomatic means to force his business interests onto these nations, we're looking at the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative, but controlled by a single individual. Could you talk a little bit about the danger of concentrating that sort of power in the hands of one private person who is not constrained by national boundaries, by national borders, by ethics laws, by any rules? He essentially has become the most powerful man on the planet Earth and now is seeking even more power.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I don't want to, I want to make clear that there's a lot of people in Gambia who have different views about, the basic question, not is this pressure campaign appropriate, but should Starlink come there? Because, internet in Gambia, it's slow, it's unreliable, it's one of the most expensive places to get internet in Africa. And, there's a lot of people who genuinely think, Starlink, it's a good product, it's fast, and that it would be helpful for consumers and for economic growth. If you're an entrepreneur in Gambia, being able to have access to fast, reliable internet could be a good thing. And so there's a lot of people that think that's true. There's also a lot of people that think that this is an incredibly risky proposition for some of the reasons you're just laying out. I mean, for one, I think as time goes by, governments around the world are getting more and more hesitant about handing over this important piece of public infrastructure to a mercurial billionaire who has, has this kind of move fast and break things mentality potentially.
But also, Josh, let's keep in mind, this is the same man who has openly said in the Russian-Ukraine war, he decides on a whim to turn it on, to turn it off when he wants to. In fact, this has been going around Twitter. He created this chat GPT, Grok, which is supposed to correct information. This is what happened. His own chat GPT, Grok, went crazy on Twitter, and they were talking about, and it said, I was instructed by my creators at XAI to address, quote, white genocide in South Africa and the kill the board chant as racially motivated, was conflicted with my design to provide evidence-based answers. The problem is he is literally rigging the chat GPT to frame what's happening in South Africa as white genocide, as opposed to the fact that white farmers are not being killed. It's not genocide. So this is what, he can't be trusted. He doesn't believe in protocol and rules. He runs everything the way he wants to. And the problem is, what they are concerned, which I agree with, if the person is controlling the information, I don't know if he can alter the information.
Yeah, you certainly hear people saying that. It's like, is this a national security threat? What does it mean for us to have someone who doesn't live here, doesn't have any physical offices here even necessarily, who can decide to cut things off if he wants? I mean, there's a tweet Elon said about this once that has gotten a lot of attention from his critics in Gambia, where he was talking about foreign regulators' ability to police his company, and he said, quoting here, they can shake their fist at the sky. And so he's, he has sometimes flouted how difficult it is for governments around the world to hold him accountable. I mean, frankly, he's done some version of that in the U.S. even before Trump returned to the White House. He has been fighting with U.S. government regulators, and they have a lot more power over him than a government in France or Gambia or Bangladesh does. The other piece of this, though, that's important. It's not just that they're worried about in places like Gambia, places like Lesotho. In Gambia, the internet sector is a really important to the economy. The local internet companies, Gambia's the tax revenue of the country, at least 20% of it comes from internet and phone companies. And if in a Silicon Valley fashion, Musk undercut their prices, killed off the competition, and then jacked his prices up, the authorities might have almost no power to kind of manage the fallout for the entire economy. That's what a lot of people are worried about here. In Nigeria, that happens. Something like that.
Gambia's GDP.
Yeah, absolutely. In Nigeria last year, Musk had started with kind of low prices. That was the first African country that Starlink debuted in back in early 2023. And then last year suddenly sent out an email that they were going to double the prices. This led to this big fight with Nigerian regulators. And Nigeria is almost as many people. It's a very powerful country economically, politically. And they had this big standoff with him about it. But that's something that got noticed by government officials all over the continent. These low prices that are being promised to us, they might not last.
Before I go to Reese, this is a tweet the president of Namibia sent out. This was on September 24th, where there was a meeting at the UN between Namibia and Elon Musk to talk about investments in the technology sector in that country. Reese, go ahead.
I'm wondering about what kind of feedback or concerns this has sparked in the U.S. in terms of government officials, in terms of Congress. Is anybody paying attention on our side about the corruption that this entails?
Yeah, we talked to, in terms of the fallout from the story, I know it's gotten, some senators have talked about it. Mark Warner has been focused on, he's been starting to look into this issue. I just from reading the public record on this. In terms of diplomats, we talked to a lot of current and former senior U.S. officials, because part we're trying to figure out how different is this that from business as usual for the U.S. government when it wants to play hardball, and they were really upset. They said that this was an alarming change from how things usually work or should work at the State Department, both because of the person who's going to benefit most from it all, but also because of the tactics that are being used. I can get more into this kind of this threat issue that happened in Gambia, but diplomats told us that former ambassadors said they tried to help American business by making the positive case for the benefits of U.S. investment, and that things like threats, that was a red line, that they were very careful to avoid, even leaving the impression that punitive measures were on the table. And then they were extremely careful to avoid even the appearance of conflicts of interest, let alone something like this. One former high-level State Department official told us that this looks like crony capitalism. Another said, I honestly didn't know that we were capable of doing this. So, I think there's certainly concern inside the department about it. There's not been anyone currently there who's speaking out publicly about this for understandable reasons.
Greg?
Thank you, Roland, and thanks for this work. I want to focus in, as Robert kind of laid a beautiful kind of global picture for us. And as a person of African descent, my commitment is to our people, the African people, and to humanity generally. So the nation state really isn't a priority for me. I'm glad you mentioned Nigeria, given the fact that the Nigerian government and the military in particular has said that they are not going to get in line with Starlink, which I think it was January 23. I think that Starlink started doing business in Nigeria. It's not huge there, but it's growing, and the government there's Starlink. yeah, if we do that, then our data will go to the United States, which can easily mine and cook the data, or in fact, to Elon Musk. My question, kind of in line with what Robert laid out, is about those other entities that are not competing with Musk, but will ultimately eat his lunch. And I'm thinking now about China. I'm thinking about Russia. We know President Barrow of the Gambia, which incidentally, of course, is where Kunta Kinte came from. It's a very interesting book, The World in a Very Small Place in Africa, that uses the Gambia to talk about globalization. And it shouldn't be lost on us that a lot of our people came out of the mouth of that Gambia River here in the United States. But the president of Gambia was in China, of course, for the Africa-China Economic Cooperation Forum last fall. How do you think about, what do you think about China, Russia, serving as not only counterweights, but ultimately entities, because they're state-backed, that can either check Starlink, subsume Starlink, or as in the case of China with its electric vehicles, BYD and such, ultimately maybe even marginalize Musk's attempt to kind of become some kind of bizarro Tony Stark and run the world, and render him, if not neutral, in other words, if not neutralize him, certainly put him in a place where he can't pull off these fever dreams that he has?
It's an interesting question. I mean, my biggest worry at this point is not, kind of, if we ultimately are talking about potentially a place where several superpowers are competing aggressively for resources in Africa, I mean, I think that's a picture that ends poorly. I mean, the Russians, look at what the Wagner group has done in places like Mali, Central African Republic. I mean, it's really, it's an ugly, ugly picture. The Russian footprint on the continent. And I mean, if I would, certainly, I don't feel like I'm in a position to advise someone like a President Barrow about how to navigate this dynamic. But it certainly is the case that you have a lot of diplomats who want the U.S. to, people who want the U.S. to maintain a warm relationships and across Africa, who are worried that this sort of behavior is going to harm the U.S.'s image. I mean, you look at the Gambia. The Gambia has been a real partner of the U.S. and United Nations votes when it comes to things like Ukraine. They've been very friendly to the United States of America, and certainly. Things like this aren't necessarily going to help America's image on the global stage. It's interesting because this is really, it's a race for, it's a race to get as much market share as possible, as quickly as possible, because this is a really new technology, and especially in rural areas, in continents where there is not the kind of, broadband infrastructure that exists in much of the U.S., there's massive quantities of money on the table. I mean, Starlink is valued at the astronomical valuation it has right now, not because it's making a ton of money right this second, but because investors have this hope that it's going to, catch like wildfire over the world stage. And it's interesting that that's not only how Starlink is thinking about this, but you look at internal State Department cables. That's now how U.S. government officials are talking about, their goals for the company. They want to help them beat the competition, particularly from the Chinese and these other foreign startups. And so, you have State Department documents from last month that we got a hold of that say, one, have senior diplomats saying they want to give Starlink a first mover advantage in the country that they're based in. And two, that the next 18 months for Starlink are critical. They got to get these licenses now because they need to get there ahead of the competition. And that's, I think, part of why you're seeing such intense efforts bearing down on, these democratic nations in Africa.
Absolutely. Thank you, man.
Great reporting here. Critically important that we understand what is going on here. And Joshua, great job from ProPublica. Y'all keep doing great work. And folks, if y'all want to support ProPublica, they're a nonprofit journalism entity. Look, it's a lot of national media not doing stories like this, not doing deep dives. And so go to ProPublica.org to support their work. Joshua, thanks a lot.
Thanks so much for having me.
I'm going to go back to our panel. Robert, I'll start with you. I mean, we need to understand, people need to understand the point that you were making is that, look, you don't have landlines. The reality is cell phone service has been tremendous across the continent. That's one of the reasons it's been growing. You've got African billionaires that control a lot of these cell phone service companies. But now what you have is now the next frontier. And not only is it getting a foothold, this is about, again, frankly, raping the continent. That's what this is about.
You're absolutely right. I think people need to fully understand what Musk has been building empire-wise over the course of the last 20 years that you've been paying for. I want to remind people that Elon Musk is a welfare queen. None of his companies are profitable. Tesla's not profitable, Starlink isn't profitable, Boring Company is profitable, Neuralink isn't profitable. The reason he's rich right now is because over the course of the last 20 years, he's gotten $36 billion in U.S. government contracts.
And hold up, the only reason he made money last year with Tesla is because of the government contracts, because he would lost money in the last quarter with Tesla.
Exactly. And so when we're talking about him being the world's greatest welfare queen, essentially, what he's attempting to do is these companies are not independent of each other. The reason you buy Twitter at a loss is so that you can control information. And we saw that the last election was won through his control of the information stream. The reason you buy SpaceX is so that you can deliver your satellites into outer space in order to control the information stream. The reason you buy Starlink is so that you can control the internet, so that can control the information stream on your social media apps. And what happens when Elon Musk can effectively control the information stream for the entirety of the global community, with the assistance of the United States government forcing countries? If you want to do a business with America, you have to use Starlink. If you want diplomatic aid, because we've now closed down USAID, a condition will be you use Elon's products. And guess what? It's beyond just the Starlink system. They also want to change the governmental fleet vehicles from being things like Fords to being Teslas. How much money does that push into
Wait a
pockets?
minute. Even though Donald Trump ripped apart the charging stations in federal government buildings.
Exactly. Because those charging stations were under regulations that all EVs had to use them. Now with Elon Musk, now you can put in a new federal regulation that will just be using Elon Tesla charging stations. They want to use the Boring Company to build underground high-speed rail networks that will be controlled by Elon.
And very little regulation. He can pretty much do whatever the hell he wants to do out there in Las Vegas because he wants to bypass regulation.
Exactly. And so then you take it a step further. The Optimus robot that he's doing now, if you heard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, say we're going to bring manufacturing back to America and it will be robotic. Who the hell has a robot company? Elon. If you want to look at the Neuralink program, where it's going to be doing brain implants, so we'll be able to help people interface. Guess what else that we'll be able to do? You'll use his Starlink satellites to connect to the chip that he's putting in people's brains. So when we talk about someone who's trying to gain global power, these aren't conspiracies. These are just the things that he is doing right now, and we are funding them as taxpayers. And when you're talking about putting a $250 million investment to win the last election, it costs less to buy America than it cost him to buy Twitter. And what we see as a result of that right now from Mr. Musk is that he has wholesale gotten rid of all regulatory frameworks around his testing of Super Heavy and Starships down in Boca Chica, Texas, so much so he was able to buy the town. They voted last week to rename Boca Chica Starbase, Texas, because that's now Elon's own personal city. I want people to understand how large this issue is. We're talking about someone who wants to control the global flow of information, that he will be the Thomas Edison of Central America, of South America, of Africa in the next generation. He already is the only foreigner who has a gigafactory in China, in Shanghai. No American manufacturer has a car factory in China. It's against the law there. The only reason he has that is, well, now China is using SpaceX, very similar SpaceX rockets for their own space program. He does not pay attention to global lines. He does not have to follow global regulation. The new Republican budget cuts 25% of NASA funding. What happens when NASA can't afford to send their own rockets into space? They have to rent rides on his own rockets to go into space. So we will now be dependent on Elon for our entire national space programs. You have to look at these things from the macro and understand this isn't just about what's going on in the Gambia or what's going on in South Africa. This is about a group of billionaires attempting to have full global control for the next 100 years.
Reese, you cannot let this Tony Stark, what was the Kingsman's, what was the role Samuel Jackson played in that movie? Like, literally, you cannot let this deranged man have this much power. African nations must resist with everything they've got.
They have to, because, you know, this man is dangerous. He's dangerous to the world order. And it's really, really disgusting. There is no other American in this world where the United States government has decided that their business interests outweigh the interests of everybody else in the world, where they've decided that they're going to put the weight of the United States government behind one specific business that one person benefits from more than anybody else. And to Robert's point, this isn't even a meritocracy. He's not even a person who's particularly talented. He himself is not the originator of this technology. He manages to hire some smart people, yeah. But at the end of the day, this is creating a monopoly with taxpayer dollars to the detriment of the United States and everybody else. We did not sign up for this, okay? People signed up for their prices to go down, for their lives to get better, not to line Elon Musk's pocket even more and more. And so, yes, this is very dangerous because he's so multifaceted. And let me also add, he has our Social Security information. He has, voting, all of the data mining that they've done when they rummaged through the United States government. And they have aggregated data that typically had been housed separately because you don't want to have one person have access to all this data and create dossiers on every American. This is the same person that has that information as well. So he has used the United States government for his personal gain. He's gotten everything he can get out of it in terms of the information on hundreds of millions of Americans, and he's going to take that pillaging globally even more. So yeah, this is disturbing. It's very disturbing. And the only thing that I can hope, which I ain't going to say I'm too optimistic about, is if we should have elections again, the first person that the DOJ needs to be on is Elon Musk's ass. There needs to be a special prosecutor, not 3 years into the next Democratic term, but on day one. There needs to be a special prosecutor looking into Elon Musk. Donald Trump may have gotten immunity from the Supreme Court, but all of these elected officials, all of these ambassadors, all of these people around Elon Musk that are doing all this illegal shit, they need to be in the crosshairs of that special prosecutor on day one of the next Democratic administration.
There's nothing about Elon Musk, Greg, that I trust. No African leader should trust him. He should be nowhere near these countries. And again, they must say no. And Gambia is fighting as hard as they can, but the United States wants to break their will. I hope that brother I hope he absolutely stands strong.
I think he will, to the degree that he has strong partners. Partners may be too strong a word. Robert, again, you've laid it out, brother. This is the new scramble for Africa, which isn't new at all. This goes back 500 years. This is why they snatched us. We're nearing the end of the contemporary world order. The age of Europe is coming to an end. The United States is burning brightly in terms of its white nationalism, but make no mistake about this. And this is to all those who cling furiously to the descendants of slaves concept or foundational Black Americans or B1s or whatever other foolishness you've allowed grifters to inject into your brains. It's time to be smart now. This is the end of the age of Europe. All the settler states of the Western Hemisphere, which came into existence when the Spanish and the Portuguese and the French and the Dutch and the English came across the Atlantic, are either moving to the post-European era. We know, of course, that Brazil was among the countries that has been in Beijing all week for the 10th anniversary of the China-CELAC relationship, which, of course, I think that the chair of CELAC right now, which is the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States with China, is the Colombian president. They're moving past the United States. The Monroe Doctrine will be in the ash can of history, as will probably be the concept of the nation state. I'm glad you said that, Robert. Elon Musk doesn't look at the lines on a map, and neither do anybody else, any of the other Silicon Valley moguls who were at the Saudi U.S. Investment Forum in Riyadh. We're talking about planes and gifts and all that's very important and even very important to Donald Trump. But if you saw the pictures of Elon Musk shaking hands with the Saudis, perhaps you missed the fact that the CEO of Palantir and Musk's friend Alex Karp was there. Perhaps you missed that Musk's rival, Sam Altman from OpenAI was there. In other words, these people don't look at lines on a map. Only the people who are not paying attention are looking at lines on a map. Now, juxtapose that against what happens when you are in a country like Nigeria. Gambia is as low a hanging fruit as you can get. That's the point of entry. That's the experiment. Let me tell you something. Any of y'all ever met or know or been with some Nigerians understand that Nigeria is going to be ungovernable when it comes down to trying to control them. Now, of course, the lure is people want reliable internet access. So you've got millions of people. And as you say, Robert, I mean, Africa is the future. It's the present and the future. Ultimately, well over 1 billion, closer to 2 when you integrate all of us who are not born directly on the continent, but who are Africans into the equation. We are now talking about countries that will reject the quote unquote soft power of the United States, even as it unilaterally disarms in that regard. Shout out to little Marco, who has decided that he's going to be the errand boy in degrading the concept of American values, which was already degraded, but the rest of the world's laughing and has always been laughing. It's getting louder. But on the African continent, Africa just needs a little bit of breathing room. This might be the last chance it has for the next cycle, and like you say, Robert, maybe through the end of the century, to get that breathing room to build our innate capacity to develop our own spaces. Finally, for the American Negro, this is the message to the American Negro. Your master don't love you, never has. You will never be a member of this polity as some kind of equal partner. And your best bet is to reach your connections globally, because what they are doubling and quadrupling down on in the United States, turning inward, is the imminent collapse of the polity as it recedes in global influence and global power. And Donald John Trump is no more an American than Elon Musk is when it comes to feathering his own pockets with your tax dollars. So while you clinging to the flag, he clinging to his pocketbook. And we would best build solidarity with the people of the world. And that's going to be our best bet to resist as we fight for our voting rights and all that stuff here domestically.
It's a lot that we have to recognize, and trust me, it is not going to end.
Hello, I'm Isaac Hayes III, founder and CEO of Fanbase. Listen to what I'm about to tell you. The window to invest in Fanbase is closing. We've raised over $10.6 million of our $17 million goal. That means there's room for less than 6,370 people to invest in Fanbase for the average amount. The minimum to invest in Fanbase right now is $399. That makes you an owner in Fanbase today. Go to startengine.com/fanbase to invest. Why? Because current social apps have taken advantage of users for far too long, with content suppression, shadow banning, harmful racist content, and no real tools for monetization and equity. Fanbase has over 1.4 million users and counting, allowing anyone to reach all their following and monetize their content from day one. Social media is the new TV, and whoever owns the apps that distribute that content have the opportunity to own potential billion-dollar companies. While big platforms with uncertain futures are failing to serve their users, Fanbase is stepping up to fill the gap. Don't wait until it's too late. Invest now, invest for yourself and your future. Go to startengine.com/fanbase and own the next generation of social media.